Great. Okay, well, thanks everybody for your patience. And welcome. My name is Monica Morrison, and I'm the Knowledge Mobilization Specialist for Global Water Futures. And I want to welcome you to this Our Water session. We are participating today from the traditional territories of the Indigenous people across the continent. Here in Saskatoon, we're meeting on Treaty 6 territory and the homeland of the Métis. We pay our respect to the First Nations and Métis ancestors of this place and reaffirm our relationship with one another. A key objective of Global Water Futures is to co-develop research with Indigenous people and communities. 6 Global Water Futures research projects have been designed specifically to bring traditional knowledge to issues of water governance, water security, climate change, and ecosystem health. This Our Water session presents a set of videos and panel discussions to share and learn about several water bodies, the communities around them, and the issues they face through the eyes of Indigenous youth, elders, and community members. We'll learn about the relationship with water and how this relationship colors research, planning, and management. Our Waters is split between 2 virtual rooms. This one, which looks at the Redberry Lake, and then the other, which is looking at Grand River in Saskatchewan River Delta. Both sessions will be recorded and available for later viewing. Participants are invited to submit questions through the chat function. To access closed captioning, just hit the toggle button at the bottom of your screen. All participants are asked to abide by the code of conduct posted on the homepage of the conference. I think you get that when you log in. Essentially, to treat all participants with dignity and respect. At the risk of interrupting discussions, I will remind everybody at the end that we need to move from the first to the second part of the session, but actually we don't have the second part of the session, so we could go on a little longer if you wish. So without further ado, I'll just introduce Maria Mora, and Maria, is it Garcet? Garcet is a social researcher, yes. Maria is a social researcher who's worked on topics related to collaborative water governance, community-based participatory research, culturality, community-based tourism, and environmental education. Currently, Maria is a PhD candidate here at the University of Saskatchewan. She's carrying out research that looks at complexities present in the water governance system in Indigenous territories in Saskatchewan. So Maria, I turn it over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Monica, and thank you everyone for joining us this morning. My name is Maria Mora. I come from Ecuador, and I worked back home with different Indigenous groups in my country around issues on sustainability, environment, and also the challenges that brings these intercultural relationships between different cultures, worldviews, knowledges, and how to build encounters that can bring more symmetrical relationships between one and another. And with that background, I came in 2014 here to Canada, and I started my PhD program in 2015. I was lucky to engage with Mr. Oasis Nehiyawak, a First Nation here in Treaty 6 territory in Saskatchewan. And with them, I worked on my thesis research project that is around collaborative water governance, the challenges, the meanings also about water, water governance, but also the issues and obstacles that people have in terms of governance for participation and breaking up with these colonial relationships and issues around the governance of water. So I worked with people in this First Nation. Anthony Johnston, who is one of the leaders in the community, was one of my co-researchers together with another Indigenous woman a very young woman leader in Mr. Oasis. And we co-developed with some people in this First Nation framework that entails the meaning of collaborative water governance from Mr. Oasis' perspective. So that work led me to find and meet different opportunities with other water stakeholders and right holders within the North Saskatchewan River watershed. And one of these stakeholders is the Redberry Lake Biosphere region, the only one here in Saskatchewan, and that has been closely working with Mr. Oasis and other First Nations for quite a long time. So in 2019, I joined the Redberry Lake and started working on a project named Species at Risk, that the main objective is to support First Nations and just any stakeholder in the Redberry Lake region to incorporate into their land management plans capacity for the protection of species at risk. One of the main components of this project is education, working closely with people in in two First Nations. One is Mr. Oasis and the other one is Musket Lake Cree Nation. And we've been working with elders and the youth around the importance and the awareness of species at risk, but into a more holistic perspective and more like into an habitat perspective, the issues that the different species are confronting, what are the threats, and what actions can we do to help these species. So I've been working over the last 2 years closely with Anita Ledoux, and it's been a very interesting process of like after my period of learning from the theory about the principles of community-based tourism, community-based participatory research, and also the challenges that reconciliation faces here in Canada, to like experience more in the practice these two like theoretical frameworks, if that's the word, like from the research perspective or from the point of building relationships, and also from the point of building pathways towards reconciliation. So that's I think this has been a process where I've been able to experience more in deep the importance of building trust and commitment when we are working with First Nations, with Indigenous people. And that's something that it goes beyond just putting the effort, but also like bringing commitment of time and just understanding that the dynamics of each of the First Nation, and that takes time. So even for my thesis research, it's been like it has brought some good opportunities for making deep the relationships with the First Nations, and trying to find opportunities for a knowledge mobilization. At the beginning of my thesis research, I had the idea to, or I was thinking about how to bring the results out of my thesis into something that will be more useful for the community. And by the time that I finished my fieldwork, I didn't have the right answer. And it has taken 2 more years after I closed my fieldwork. and I've been working or continuing working with Mr. Oasis through the Species at Risk project, that I'm recently finding more ways where the community feels like the information that I got from my thesis will be useful for them, and how the sense of honoring water can be part of each of the actions that we are taking in our work. I think that it's being, I will have to continue, and I'm happy that the project keeps in the long term. So the actions that I start in my research project can continue and can have some more meaning to the people in Mr. Oasis. I will pass now to Anita so she can complement this brief introduction. And we didn't know that we had a long-term, like a long time to talk. So otherwise I would have prepared something more like a presentation or something, but I hope that with what we have with Anita can be meaningful for this discussion.
All right, thank you, Maria. Well, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Anita Ledoux, and I am from Mistawasis Neheyawak here in Saskatchewan. It's a First Nation located in central Saskatchewan. And would also like to say on behalf of Anthony, he wanted to be here today, but he's gone overseas to Germany for 2 weeks. So we are here in his stead. And yeah, back in 2016, I began my master's program at the University of Saskatchewan in Sustainable and Environmental Management. And I was fortunate enough to work with my own community, Mistawasis Neheyawak. And my project focused specifically on how agricultural practices were affecting the soil and the freshwater sources, the wetlands that we have within our First Nation. So I took a few years to do that. And in 2019, towards the end of my studies, there were a couple good things that came out of it immediately. The first one was an environmental management component for lessers, and those are the folks that are non-Indigenous that come onto our First Nations lands and farm the land for crop production. So that was adhered to their leases that they signed with our First Nation that they had to abide by. The second component was reduction in aerial spray of chemical synthetic chemicals. So yeah, so that was really fantastic that came about. From there, I was asked to present at the Saskatchewan Association of Watersheds on water. And the main focus that I focused on with that one was to develop relationships with First Nations people, because water doesn't flow around Indigenous lands. We need to include other First Nations as stakeholders, as partners, and in doing that, it's important to build those relationships before you become a partner. You have to build the relationship. You have to, build those friendships. You have to, work on having their trust for them to, allow you to continue with what you're doing. Yeah, so that's one of the key components, is building relationships with people. So after that presentation, I was fortunate enough to come aboard with the Redberry Lake Biosphere region as a project coordinator for the Species at Risk project that Maria spoke of. And we're in our second of 4 years. And because of COVID, it sort of came to a little bit of a standstill, but we're moving, you know, in a way that's good and bringing people together. And these first couple of years, really, we're just focusing on building relationships, reaching out to different communities within the biosphere, and putting forth the reasons, you know, that we're working on this. And of course, with species at risk, it not only focuses on the ecosystems and the biodiversity, but as the water as well. So everything is interchangeable and sort of like a interdisciplined, in other words. So with that, yeah, that's pretty much all I would like to say. So we're going into our third year now. So we continue to work on the relationships, and we've reached out to some non-Indigenous communities within the biosphere. And as far as I know, it's precedent setting. So we are, you know, putting ourselves forward to, you know, build those bridges of reconciliation. That is one of the components, one of the pillars of our project as well. So there are multi-spin-offs and additional information that we're gathering and learning along the way. So it is a wonderful project, and we will continue to involve the community members, the students, and the teachers, and, you know, administration and lands department within the First Nations that are part of this project. So thank you.
Thank you, Anita, and also Maria. We're still struggling to get Daniel on board here. Was it Daniel who was going to introduce the videos?
I believe he sent them to Corinne.
Right, I do have the links here. I'm not sure we can run them directly off of the web. This is because it was kind of intended that you guys would control that. So should we?
I have them ready to go if you want.
Oh, perfect. Thank you, Corinne.
Yeah.
Just to note that that one of the films about the buffalo is a preview, and that there will be an official launch of this film several weeks from now on their website. So we're really lucky, I guess, Corinne, that we have this today. So thank you.
Anita and Maria, is there an order you want them in?
No, not particularly, Corinne.
No.
Okay, I'll do the star blanket first then.
Sure.
I met with Chief and Council on Mistawasis, and I said that I'm from the Redberry Lake Biosphere Reserve, and one of our goals is protecting the land around Redberry Lake. We would like you to join up with us and be a partner with us. And so the chief says, well, actually you are on our territory and you will be our partner, not us your partner. You realize that's right. They were here a lot sooner than us, and we are on their territory, on their reserve.
The location of our community today is our traditional wintering grounds. Spring, summer, and fall, we used to travel hundreds of miles and followed and lived with the plains buffalo. So Redberry Lake itself is within our traditional territories. and is one of our traditional gathering places where we'd go and wait for word about which way the buffalo were going. In the times of our ancestors, especially on the plains, partnership, friendship, alliances.
Is anyone else
were
seeing the
what
desktop rather than the video?
prosperous.
Thank you for letting me know. I wasn't sure. I was trying to text Monica to check. Hang on a minute.
Sorry, Corinne, I didn't realize I was seeing the video.
Was everyone seeing the video? Or were they seeing the desktop?
I was only seeing the desktop.
Desktop.
Okay, we'll try it again. Apologies.
I met with Chief and Council on Mistawasis, and I said that I'm from the Redberry Lake Biosphere Reserve, and one of our goals is protecting the land around Redberry Lake. We would like you to join up with us and be a partner with us. And so the chief says, well, actually you are on our territory and you will be our partner, not us your partner. You realize that's right. They were here a lot sooner than us, and we are on their territory, on their reserve.
The location of our community today is our traditional wintering grounds. Spring, summer, and fall, we used to travel hundreds of miles and followed and lived with the plains buffalo. So Redberry Lake itself is within our traditional territories and is one of our traditional gathering places where we'd go and wait for word about which way the buffalo were going. In the times of our ancestors, especially on the plains, partnership, friendship, alliances were what made us strong and prosperous. There were many tribes on the plains that followed the buffalo. At times there was competition, and so we formed alliances. So with our alliances and with our treaties and the treaties we made with the Crown in 1876, our perspective, our meaning behind treaty was that we're sharing these territories, we're sharing these lands, we're sharing these resources. We're not giving up anything, we're not taking anything, but we're simply sharing. So now in the 21st century, we have different partners, but all we're doing really is just reestablishing ourselves in our traditional territories.
I really met Anthony when we did a trip together. We had a good chance to chat, and we started talking about our past and what's important to us, and we found out that our goals were the same. Our communities were important to us, his being the reserve and mine being Hafford and the Biosphere Reserve.
We just happened to meet, share stories, and then later found ways to work together. And I think that working relation becomes more true because we began off in friendship.
I think we've got to that point where, yeah, we're friends and we're considered trustworthy of each other, that what we do is important to both of us and for the common good.
Last year at our powwow, our first grand entry was to honor all our partners. So we invited our partners to come to the first grand entry, and each of them was honored with a star blanket. The blanket is meant to keep you warm, but it's also a gift to welcome you into the Mistawasis family. So John's a member of the Mistawasis family.
You just feel like you're part of the community. Now when I go there, everybody says hello and I say hello, and it's that feeling of comfort that you can come there anytime and be accepted.
Part of our ancient view was that human beings, people, were the weakest spirit, and depended on all other spirits to provide for us. And today I feel that our young people and even adults have lost that connection to land, have lost that respect for old spirits. And I think it's through discussions with others, biosphere reserves, that we can rediscover these values, the respect for place. And by working together, we'll protect our beautiful resources, our beautiful places. And let's find a good way to share.
Thanks, Corinne. I hope everyone was able to hear and to see.
I'll do the second one now. Is that okay? Can everyone see it?
I'm seeing it.
Have you ever seen a buffalo up close?
Yes, I have. Yeah, at one point, it seemed like that they were on the defensive, but I think they were just as curious as we were, observing them and how they were observing us.
I often imagine what it was like in the 1800s, riding a horse with a herd of buffalo.
It was like they surrounded them as we got close to them. All the little bison were in the middle, and the old guys are all around, like facing on the outside, looking on the outside, and the children were inside. So that same concept, I guess, as First Nations people, where we have our children in the middle and we protect them.
200 years ago and further back, there were many people, many tribes that followed the buffalo on the Great Plains. Mr. Wasnehiyawak, our ancestors, were some of those people that followed the buffalo. The buffalo provided many things. Of course, it fed us, gave us tools, gave us clothing, but it also taught us. It was a teacher. When the buffalo came to a point of extinction in the late 1800s, we lost that connection to the buffalo, our teacher.
%80 of all plains bison today are descendants of just one of the few remaining herds, the Pablo Allard herd, which started as just 4 calves saved by Atatitsa and his son Latatitsa. By 1904, the herd had grown to 800 on the Flathead Reservation in Montana and was sold to the Government of Canada. Rounded up and freighted to Elk Island National Park in Alberta, most of these bison went on to the newly created Buffalo National Park. However, due to poor funding and overgrazing, this herd suffered from outbreaks of bovine tuberculosis. Luckily though, 30 or so bison stayed at Elk Island with their health and genetic lineage intact. Over the past century, Elk Island has transferred more than 2,500 bison to other conservation sites across the world. In 1969, 50 were brought to the Thunder Hills of northern Saskatchewan. It was hoped that they would become a local food source, but almost instantly, the herd scattered. A few months later, 15 of these bison migrated southwest from the Thunder Hills and settled in Prince Albert National Park. They became the first free-roaming herd of plains bison in Canada since the species' near extinction almost a century earlier. Today, this herd's survival hangs by a thread, and a coalition of First Nation communities, ranchers, Parks Canada, and the Canadian Parks and Wilderness Society have come together to ensure that it does.
Sturgeon River Plains bison herd is obviously a living for us because people come from all over the world to see them. And bison are an important part of the ecosystem, so we like to show them the herd, teach them about the ecology of the herd. They're almost like friends at this point. And it's exciting every time you do see them because the people are excited and you never know what's going to happen. Definitely a unique thing to see in nature. Wild bison in their historic habitat, and they still treat you like they're wild.
The Sturgeon River Plains bison accidentally returned to the area where they are now in the southwest corner of Prince Albert National Park in 1969. I was 2 years old. I still remember that day when all of a sudden there was bison running around and everybody was excited and didn't know what was going on.
The Sturgeon River Plains bison herd is important for the survival and integrity of the species because they're one of the few wild, free-ranging plains bison herds still within their historic range. Plains bison, as a species, is known as a keystone species. So without bison, the ecosystem can't function as it's intended. Plains bison are currently listed as threatened by COSEWIC, which is the Committee on the Status of Endangered Wildlife in Canada.
Plains bison have been recommended for listing under the Federal Species at Risk Act since 2003 by COSEWIC. Yet they've never achieved listing by the minister, despite that recommendation being in place since then and being reinforced once since then. The reality is they're a threatened species in the wild.
The bison have always been an integral part of our community. It's basically the cornerstone of our belief systems as Nahel people. It's our traditional way of survival, but today things have changed, differently. We shop more at Superstore and Safeway now than we did before in our own backyard. So that's one of the main reasons why we're so adamant that the buffalo herd at Sturgeon River has to be, saved for future generations to come.
One of the greatest challenges is public awareness. At times, the herd was healthy, numbering over 400, and I think today many people still think the herd is healthy. It's not healthy.
Back in 2008, we had approximately 400, and currently we have 100 bison. The herd is exposed to all natural stressors, such as disease, like anthrax, and predation by wolves and bears.
The greatest challenges today are our own people. They're overhunting the traditional territories of the bison.
And I would suspect from some of the farmers, obviously bison can do a lot of damage in a very short period of time when it comes to crops. So when they come out of the park and cross the river into the farmland, the farmers obviously sometimes retaliate.
We're lucky to have the Sturgeon River Plains bison herd. And we're lucky to have opportunities to bring bison back other places. But the existing populations that we have, like Sturgeon River, if we can't make those projects sustainable and keep these herds into perpetuity and show that this can be done, then it's going to be really hard for us to justify doing bison conservation and bison repatriation elsewhere.
Prince Albert National Park have put up some diversion fences at river crossings still within the park boundary to help reduce the amount of time that bison spend outside of the park, which also helps with the amount of bison being harvested and the amount of damage that bison cause on private land. We've also put fire back on the landscape, which helps restore grassland areas and increases sedge meadows, giving more habitat for bison. Because the herd roams in and out of the park boundary, they also occupy provincial crown land and privately owned land. So co-management strategies are important.
Mr. Wallace, like many First Nations, has lost that connection to water, land, and sky. And like many First Nations today in the 21st century, we're looking for ways to reconnect to water, land, and sky. And we're doing this through our young people with land-based programming in both of our elementary school and high school. Also, in the 21st century, with the Sturgeon River herd, we're looking for ways to reconnect with brother buffalo.
Since we've become involved, our young people have taken, a firm stance, I guess, with respect to understanding, the culture and behavior of the bison and how it relates to us as Nahilk people. Over the past 2 years, we've seen some sustained growth, and I think it's basically been as a result of us as First Nations becoming more involved in the herd there and ensuring their longevity. So it's important for Mr. Wasses to take that lead in educating our neighbors about the importance of maintaining the survival of the herd at Sturgeon River.
We want our young people to be the ones to learn the landscape that the buffalo call home and learn about the nature of the creature. I think one of the greatest successes is when our young people visited and sat with individual landowners outside the park. I know for our young people, that may have been their first time ever in a rural, non-Indigenous household. And maybe for those landowners, it may be the first time that they had young First Nation people sitting at their kitchen table, sharing coffee, sharing stories. And for me, that's real reconciliation. And hopefully, because it's our young people and maybe the older landowners, we can continue to find ways to work together on other matters as well, in addition to the herd. No one individual, not one community, not one organization or level of government is going to have the answer. Collectively, we'll find the answers to ensure the herd continues.
Parks Canada hopes that the Sturgeon River herd rebounds to a healthy population number, becomes more genetically diverse, and can remain in the area so that future generations can come and experience this unique herd.
The government needs to kind of recognize too the importance of the herd to make them species at risk, to identify them as wildlife.
I don't see that we can have reconciliation without reconciling our relationship with bison as well. They're keystone, not just ecologically to their landscape, but they're keystone species culturally. They're a keystone species for the conservation movement. They just represent so much.
It gives you, a comforting feeling that these ancestral beings, have maintained our culture and lifetime for centuries on end, and will continue, to support, the endeavors of us to maintain that herd well into, our next generations. And hopefully the legacies that we want to leave behind is the ability of our children to understand and nurture the understanding of our Nahilk ways, so that they too can in turn can provide that same experience to their children as our community grows and develops and prospers moving forward.
I hope for my time comes that we have a herd on Mr. Wass's lands, so that others can be beside the buffalo, just feel the presence of these beautiful creatures.
Thank you, Corinne, for making sure that we saw those two really moving videos. It gives us a lot of context for what our two speakers had to say. I don't know if Daniel's had a chance to join us in the interim. Perhaps not. And we're pretty much on time for our original session, but it would be very nice to have some questions and conversations, especially the Man in the Biosphere program is really special in that it really addresses the core issue of how developing human societies can coexist with more natural environments. So it's a really, really interesting issue. And these two films kind of showed us the way that it can be approached. Can we request that people ask questions at this point? Maria and Anita, any further comments, given that you had a chance to see those two films?
Yeah, that was my first time actually seeing the films, and it confirms how I feel. I do have difficulties at times articulating those emotions, but watching the videos was incredibly empowering, and it just confirms the basis of building friendships, building relationships, and working from there.
Yeah, for me, I have seen the videos before, and I think they both just summarize the work that I've seen Mr. Was is doing over since I'm working with them. And something that I always have heard in Mr. Wasis, and especially from Anthony, is the importance of sharing a common table, bringing everyone to the same table and having the opportunity to build friendships, partnerships, and from that start talking about how can we help to each other. So I think both videos just summarize the work, and I'm very happy and lucky to be working with Mr. Wasis.
Thank you. Anybody else would like to make a comment or ask a question for our two speakers?
I have a question and comment, if I may. Thank you, and it was wonderful to be able to see those videos and share the environment. I had the privilege of being in Mr. Wasis for a week last week. And Anita, I'm just curious, what practical things can I do, the rest of us non-Indigenous allies, what can we do? How best can we support these types of activities? And Maria, you've also talked about how you've been working with your PhD, but are there any specific things that we can do to further support the creation of these relationships and the respect that we need for sustainable environments?
Well, my first thought to that, Corinne, is, I guess, to look at how you respond to your environment personally. And if you respect, your immediate circle, and then the circle that gets bigger and bigger, those elements of your interpersonal relationship and the relationship at large automatically fills out into Indigenous communities if you bring it with a pure heart. So I suggest, moving in a way that, respects yourself first and foremost, right? And then developing those relationships with First Nations if you have that opportunity. And in terms of support, perhaps educating yourselves if you're not aware, or working with First Nations communities, just educate and learn about, the historical components, the issues that First Nations face, and along those lines of realizing that, ultimately we're all treaty people. So I hope that answers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And we have a question from Jacqueline Porter.
Hi. Thank you very much, everyone, for your discussions and the videos. My question is, well, something that I've been trying to answer in just some general work I've been doing with. So I've been discussing about collaboration between governments, organizations, Indigenous peoples, non-Indigenous peoples, and I'm just wondering, what are your thoughts on the establishment of, like, let's say, bridging organizations to help mediate those discussions and conversations and group projects and things like that between different stakeholders? Is that a good first step, or is that just going to complicate it further?
I think that especially working with government agencies, I found through my thesis research difficulties for having open doors to work and have their perspectives and what they would like, or what are their roles into the governance system. However, I think it's important to still bring them, or keep trying to bring them to the table that I was mentioning before. Talking to Anthony, I think that was one of the key successful things that Mr. Wasis did, especially when facing their flooding issues some years ago, that even though the relationships are not like fluent and there are not really partnerships established with some of those government agencies, but Mr. Wasis has kept trying and bringing them into their territory. And in the end, I think the results were positive for the benefit of Mr. Wasis. So I think that even though sometimes can bring different interests and different ways of seeing as a specific issue, but I don't think we can just omit their participation, and that was the successful thing for Mr. Wasis, just join or bring everyone at the same table so everyone can have a voice and everyone can have the opportunity to raise their concerns, their input into the project that they were at that time working on, and through that building partnerships with the different stakeholders, including the government.
Thank you.
Any further questions? We have reached the end of our assigned time. We do have extra if people would like to continue.
I have a question for the lady that just asked the question.
Yes.
Jacqueline, yeah. So I just need to clarify what your question was for me to respond to it. Are you asking to bring in a negotiator to help with developments of the work that you're doing between the government agencies or NGOs?
Well, from what I've heard from discussions with watershed agencies and Indigenous communities is this common theme of the difficulties of establishing a relationship, either because they're not sure how to establish the relationship, you know, or they're fearful of making mistakes or making a bad impression. And that's what I've gotten from those discussions. So I'm just wondering if there was some like person or group that can act as kind of the middle ground to help establish that relationship, and then which would then help strengthen it further into the future.
What I would suggest is if you are on the side of, you know, the NGO or a government or an organization wanting to work with First Nations people, suggest contacting the administration first and foremost, deciding who, you know, determining who it is that you need to speak to, and invite yourself into their community. Because if you bring in a negotiator, you've already taken away that opportunity to build that underlying foundation of relationship. You've already taken it to that next level. So I say invite yourself out there, or if you're on the First Nation side and you want to, and it's, you know, people that are coming into your community, invite them out. As Maria was saying earlier, invite them out and let them know that there's no such thing as making, you know, insurmountable mistake that cannot be corrected. You know, we're only human, right? And we're all working towards the same issues. So I say take the leap.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anita, did you have something to add, or should we wrap up?
Unless no more questions.
Well, then we leave with a lot to think about. And thank you to our two presenters. And apologies to Daniel, who wasn't able to make it. He wasn't able to leap the technology barrier. But it's really left us with a lot to think about. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending. And I think if you would like to move to another session, after we leave, you can go to the schedule that's on the website and click on the next session you'd like to attend. Corinne, any last instructions?
No, just that there is the parallel session going on, and I believe that it is the Saskatchewan Delta on the other Zoom link, and then we'll be convening for a high-level panel after that. But thank you.
Thank you all. Goodbye.